This is the free audiobook of Elemental Power. If you haven't heard the previous chapters, you'll find the link to the playlist in the description below. You can start at Chapter 1 or just pick up where you left off. Book 1, Shattered. Chapter 11, Lectures on Elemental Powers. I found the two men sitting together on the grass in the bright sunshine when I came out with breakfast. Marlowe was fully formed in a land-dwelling body. His skin was a slightly inhuman shade of coral orange, with hair that was so ash blonde it was faintly green, like a bottle blonde after a chlorinated swim. He was neither attractive nor otherwise. I supposed it was the nature of water to remain neutral. I set the tray, piled high with food and tea, on a flat spot in front of the chatting men and sat beside Glenn. There were all kinds of sweet fruits. It was the first time since Ambius's house that we had dawdled over a meal, taking time to savor it. "Thank you for the breakfast, ma'am," Marlowe said, digging in hungrily. "Where did the food come from?" "The tent. We ask for something, and it appears," I explained. Marlowe nodded. "That's the power of Ambius, of course. Only a wind master could make something appear out of thin air." "What do you mean, wind master?" Glenn asked. I could see his incessant curiosity peak. Winter would last at least 3 moon cycles here, but longer in the north. We would set off on the third full moon to the northern lands, hoping the time it took to reach Worm would be enough to thaw the path. "Each watcher commands the power of the element of their realm. Our world is created with the 4 main elements governed by the master of that element. Ambius is air, silver is water, rock is fire." He shivered a bit at the thought. "And Worm is earth." He took a long sip of tea and smiled, raising his cup in thanks. "Ambius can make things appear and vanish at will because he is the master of the air not only in this realm, but in all others. He is the most powerful of the 4 watchers because the air is so vital in all the realms, even mine. Silver commands the water everywhere as well, but her main power lies in the western lands. There is no water in the southern lands of fire, and in the north the water freezes, rendering it useless for most purposes," he said, taking a large forkful of cantaloupe and shoving it into his mouth. Glenn asked, "What purpose does water serve, usually?" Marlowe swallowed his mouthful, wiped his lips with the back of his sleeve, took a large gulp of tea, and smiled. "Transportation, communication, bringing life, and drowning it out. We are linked by the element of water, and we harness every power it possesses. Water flows, erodes, refreshes. A water being can even travel through random puddles, raindrops, tears." He faded off, reaching for more food. "I learned about the tears firsthand. I inadvertently called forward the shades of my dead wife and child, just by letting a tear fall to the ground in their memory. I know to be more careful with what touches this land. I'm sorry for your loss." Glenn dipped his head in acceptance. "That is actually the power of the water lands, not the water itself, but you get the concept. There is potential in even a drop. The power of fire is to consume, renew, alight, and explode. That is the element I know the least about, with us being canceling elements. I can quench fire, but fire can evaporate me. We prefer to keep our distance." He devoured another heaping helping of fruit and continued. "Earth has its power as well, to crush, grind, quake, and move. Water and earth make a formidable force when mixed together. We can cause earth to flow, and earth can enable us to smother. We also combine with air to create fog, rain, snow, sleet, or hail. All of the elements are separate, but mix well with the others in some way when used properly." "Like primary colors," I said, and Glenn glanced at me, eyebrows raised as if impressed. "Yes," Marlowe said, "exactly. Only there are 4, not 3. "Okay," I said, turning to Glenn as I set my plate on the ground and stood. "I'm going to go rest for a bit." I bent down to kiss the top of his head. I loved the way he smelled, like the earth after a rainstorm, petrichor, woodsy and clean. He smelled green. That was it. I caught the shrewd stare of Marlowe upon me and turned to meet his gaze. He had gray eyes as deep as the waters he came from. He looked down at the ground below his crossed legs, picking up small pebbles and letting them drop. I walked back into our tent. I longed for Glenn to follow me through the doors, but he didn't. He remained outside with Marlowe for so long that I stopped waiting and wished for a good book to read. Our entire relationship existed within this dangerous undertaking, and we had been so focused on our task that being now freed of immediate action, I was craving connection. A thick tome appeared in my hand. Human and elf relationships, deconstructing ego and uniting the races. I grimaced at the tent ceiling. I could feel it smiling down at me, though I saw nothing. I put the book down on the floor beside the bed and drifted off to sleep, with irritation making my eyes squeeze shut tighter than they should. I was sitting alone in a tiny classroom in the front row. An old man was teaching, pointing at the different elements up on a blackboard. "You are the descendant of the great Crygil Lord. You must learn how to effectively wield the powers given you through his angelic blood," he creaked in an old smoker's voice. "He was an angel?" I asked. I was young, maybe in first or second grade. "Half angel," he answered. The teacher was short and had wobbly hanging skin around his neck. Big, puffy bags of skin twitched under watery eyes when he glared at me. "The things he learned from the angels wise enough to leave heaven and live elsewhere is what I am here to teach you, young princess." "What? I'm a princess?" I asked, boggling at the thought. I played My Little Ponies with my friend Yvette, but she never let me be the princess pony. Now I was a real live princess. Couldn't wait to rub it in her face. "Yes, but you can never tell," he said, as if reading my mind. "I have taught many others the ways of magic, and I know what you're thinking. But the magic only works if you keep your identity a secret." "Okay," I agreed reluctantly, looking at the strange symbols on the blackboard behind him. He took his pointer and slapped it against the center of the board over a circle. "This is the Dead Spring. It is the heart of the elemental world where our ancestor rose to power nearly 1,000 years ago." He pointed directly above that. "This is the north, earth." He pointed to the right of the circle. "This is the east, air." Then below the circle, "This is the south, fire." Pointing to the left of the circle, he said, "And this is the west, water." It works the same in our world. For every spell to be complete, each element must be represented: earth, air, fire, water, and the heart of magic. I will teach you simple spells at first, to see if you have the gift. Not all the children of the warlord do, you know. I was staring at his turkey skin neck swinging from side to side as he looked down his nose and shook his head at me. My parents had forced me to come to this school. We went to church every Sunday morning, but immediately afterward they dropped me off in this gray room in a giant house on the outskirts of town. My entire afternoon was spent here. I wanted to be at home climbing trees and making mud pies. I couldn't believe that I was really magical. That was only pretend, I thought. Realizing he was waiting for my answer, I said, "I know." He snorted and coughed an emphysema-ridden series of whoops and hacks. Recovering, he picked up 4 small pouches from his desk and set them in front of me. I opened each one. He had given me the 4 elements. I looked up at him, puzzled. "What am I supposed to do?" "I am going to see if you have the gift," he answered, took out a knife, and sliced my tiny hand across the palm. Blood dripped in the midst of the elements. He squeezed my fist tightly and made drops fall on each one. Then he put his hands on my head and began to chant. His feeble eyes rolled back until all I could see were the bloodshot sclerae, quivering. His chant sent shivers down the back of my neck, and I realized that the shivers were shooting down my arms and legs as well. I felt the breath leaving my body. I was moving my mouth along with the chant, though I had no idea what he was saying. It was spoken in an ancient language, harsh but melodic. My vision went black, and I saw red eyes glowering at me in the darkness. I screamed. "What did you see?" he asked feverishly, shaking me until my head whipped back and forth like a rag doll. "Eyes," I said. "Red eyes." He let go of me then, laughing with an eerie cackle and hopping from one foot to the other with delight. Reaching into his suit pocket, he produced a lollipop and handed it to me with a denture smile. "Very good, child, very good. You saw him. You are a true princess, and you do have the power. We will begin the real training next week. His influence is strong in you." I want to go home, I sobbed, taking the candy, staring at my bloody palm. Yes, that's enough for today, he said. I'll see you next Sunday. He left me in the room, alone, still dripping blood, with the vision of the eyes burning me from the inside out. I woke to hands on my shoulders. My eyes popped open and I saw Glenn bending down to kiss me. Finished with guy time for today? I asked, a bit chilly toward him. He had left me waiting. Ready to come back to your boring old wife? He lifted his head and gawked at me. You? Boring. Never. I wasn't really mad, and the touch of him on my skin was intoxicating. I wanted more, but he had hurt me, and I intended for him to know it. He made a confused, inquisitive noise. I couldn't see him, but I felt him bend down to pick up the book I had discarded. What's this? He asked. I could hear the smile in his voice. The tense idea of a joke, I replied tersely. He stood and moved to the other side of the bed to look at my face. What did I do? His tone was conciliatory, but also clearly ignorant as to why I was upset. I sat up, my movements as huffy as the sigh of exasperation that answered him. I grabbed my robe and shook it out. What time is it? Midday, he said with a tone of incomprehension. I left you with Marlowe just after breakfast. What did you think I was doing in here? I finished dressing and leaned forward menacingly. Well, he said, looking around for clues. Sleeping. No, I said flatly. I was waiting for you. I fell asleep when you didn't come. Are you so used to me already that time with me is worth nothing? Oh, Alana, I am so sorry, he said, hanging his head in shame. I didn't realize. I was just so excited to learn from a water sprite. If I'd known, you have to believe me, that I would have knocked him over to run in here after you. I wanted to smile, picturing that scene, but didn't. How could you not understand what I meant? You're a clever elf, I said, instead, frowning. Not always, and especially not when it comes to women. I do apologize. Please forgive me, my love. I looked him in the eyes finally, knowing I was calm enough to see those eyes and not burst into tears. The look of penitence in his features was so apparent that my hurt deserted me. He must have seen a glimmer of my thoughts reflected in my eyes because he broke out in the grin he knew I could not resist. My heart squeezed to see it. A few moments later he said, I love you, Alana. That was all I needed to know. He may be hiding something, but it didn't matter. As long as I had him, I could face what was coming. Silver must have been testing me, putting that insidious suggestion at the forefront of my mind. I wanted to forget it, like I'd forgotten everything else. Glenn, is there something you're not telling me? He went absolutely still. The arms wrapped around me tightened with tension. What makes you say that? Something Silver told me. He sighed, and then he lied to my face. No, Alana, I'm not hiding anything from you. A storm began rolling in over the watery flatlands of the west. The patter of the raindrops struck the rocky landscape and the canvas tent in rising volume. My breath puffed out and fogged, mixing with the mist creeping over everything in the tent. It crept into my heart and watered the seed of doubt that Silver had planted. He pulled me down onto the bed as the mist slid over us. The world went a deep shade of gray. The sound of the rain muffled. I felt suddenly exhausted. Glenn's chest rose and fell in the rhythm of sleep. My eyelids became impossible to control. Everything went black. If you enjoyed this chapter, please give it a like and/or a comment. And if you think someone else might enjoy the story, please share with them the first chapter. If you subscribe and turn the notification bell on, you'll be the first to know when the new chapter is released.